wanted to run through with you today was really just to talk through a couple of slides. This first one really is talking about the breadth of Microsoft security services that are available to you. This slide is available from Microsoft to download. It's got a ton of links and information that can really help you start planning your own cybersecurity projects. So the customers that we speak to, really, there's probably falling into three categories. They're either on-premise completely and they're looking to move into cloud, or they're completely cloud-based and are coming to talk to us about a specialist subject within Azure. But the most common we see is hybrid, so customers that have some on-prem presence and also are working across cloud as well. So Microsoft have got security technologies that reach out from Azure and Microsoft 365 to support their customers with hybrid workloads, tools such as Arc and Endpoint Manager. So talking of Endpoint Manager, leveraging tools within that like Intune, you can begin to organize the security of those endpoints, creating groups and then using the tools within it that are available to keep those devices secure. So some of the things that you can do is you can review the status of all your managed devices at once. So viewing your device compliance from a high level, and then you can then drill into those specific devices to understand which compliance policies aren't met, and then how you can go about resolving those. With the compliance policies, you set the rules that those devices and users must meet to be considered compliant for your organization. So those rules can be around things like OS versions, password requirements, device threat levels, and others. So if you've deployed Office 365 and you've connected that to your on-prem Active Directory, which I'm sure a lot of you will have done, you've already deployed a modern single identity and you more than likely already have single sign-on capabilities across your estate, leveraging Azure Active Directory. So in addition to single sign-on, Microsoft provides some critical modern security elements through Azure AD. These include things like passwordless and MFA. So for those of you that aren't already using MFA, it works by combining things something that you know, so like a password or a PIN for your machine, and then something you have. So that could be the FIDO2 keys or the Authenticator app, or it can be something that you are. So leveraging Hello for Business for biometric authentication. MFA is quite an easy one to implement. And I think there's a stat from Microsoft that I found really compelling, which is, multi-factor authentication for businesses can help reduce the risk of identity compromise by more than 99.9%. I mean, that's a huge impact just by making one change within your environment. Also got identity protection, so you can protect yourself against highly prevalent attacks with tools such as leaked credential protection, behavioral analytics, and threat intelligence integration. So taking leaked credential protections, this is a pretty good one. When cyber criminals compromise a valid password for a user, they'll often share those credentials. So typically that's done by posting publicly on the dark web, using paste sites, or they may even sort of trade and sell the credentials on the black market. So Microsoft go out to these sites on the dark web, the paste sites, and other sources, to gather those leaked credentials, and then they check those against Azure AD users' current valid credentials to see if they find any matches. If they do, you can be alerted to that. You've got Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, or PIM. So identify privileged accounts and then reduce the risk of those credentials being exposed by providing just-in-time access using approval workflows. So again, why do you need to reduce that risk? Well, privileged accounts are what hackers are after. They want accounts with elevated permissions where they can gain access and do the most damage. There's identity governance as well, which helps people, help ensure that you've got the right people having access to the right resources. And then you've got Azure AD B2B and B2C. So taking the same security that you're using internally for your own users and extending that to your partners, as well as your customers and your clients. And then we've also got conditional access. So this is an element of zero trust about explicitly validating the users and the endpoints that are requesting access to your resources. So that can be through a combination of looking at the behaviour of that user. They logged in from the UK yesterday at 9 o'clock in the evening. It's 9 o'clock in the morning in the US, and they're logging in. Is that likely? Do we need to validate that that's that person is to say who they are, and we'll get them to use MFA to access that resource. So next you've got Azure AD Proxy. So this service provides remote access to on-premise web applications. So users authenticate with Azure AD, and that allows your on-site applications to then leverage Azure AD's authorization controls and security analytics. So, for example, you can have an on-premise application that uses conditional access and two-step verification. And as a sort of added security benefit, application proxy doesn't require you to open any inbound connection through your firewall to make use of it. So hybrid infrastructure, securely connecting through things like Express Route, Private Link, or VPN. And in addition to that, we've got Azure Defender for Cloud. So again, hybrid workloads, protecting your workloads across Azure and other clouds. It can detect unusual activity around your storage accounts and malware uploads to Azure storage. It can also, scan container images for vulnerabilities. It's not just, servers that it's looking after. There's a whole host of infrastructure there as well that's listed, around from Azure. We will touch on some of those a little bit later. And of course, Azure Arc, allowing you to reach out across your on-prem and other cloud vendors from Azure to deploy security configurations and agents. So Azure Defender, again, it's not just about VMs, it's not just about workstations. You can protect your entire SQL estate. You can secure unmanaged Internet of Things devices using agentless monitoring. There's cross-cloud XDR, or extended detection and response. So this is collecting and then automatically correlating data across multiple security layers, things like email, endpoint, server, your cloud workloads, and your network. So what's the benefit of collecting all of this data and analysing it at once? Well, it can allow for a fast detection of threats that are coming in on multiple points, and it provides improved investigation and response times when you're doing analysis of the security. Microsoft referred to this as threat intelligence, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So SOC services. So from Microsoft, you've got Threat Experts is a managed threat hunting service. You've got the Detection and Response Team, or DART. Their job is to respond to customers that have been compromised, so helping customers become cyber resilient. So that can be through an on-site reactive service. It can be something they do proactive remotely. But the main thing, when I've looked at them before, is there is just loads and loads of free advice out from them of how to increase your cyber resilience, simple steps that you can take, and all that information is out there from that team. We've also got Microsoft Sentinel, which is Microsoft's cloud native SIEM, SOAR, and UEBA. So for those of you who aren't familiar with SIEMs, SIEM is the security incident and event management, so about collecting and analysing the data that's within your environment. SOAR is security orchestration, automation, and response, so how you can respond to those threats that get identified. And then UEBA stands for User and Entity Behavior Analytics. So providing some actionable intelligence for Microsoft customers to be able to respond to. We've also got development, so GitHub Advanced Security. So this is about putting developers front and center for application security. It's the most effective way to shift that security left and kind of succeed against generating technical debt for an application. So instead of needing to reverse engineer a fix or apply patches once an app's been developed, having security throughout that life cycle right from the beginning, addresses security issues up front and makes the apps that you're deploying secure. So this is next part is talking about securing privileged access and privileged access workstations or PORs. So again, this is all about advice. It's not all just about technology. It's about information. It's about good working practices. And Microsoft have tons of advice on how an organisation should be making securing privileged access to their top priority. As we said, hackers want access to those accounts, the privileged accounts, and then, like I said, tons of advice out there for how you can address that. So there's compliance tools, within the Microsoft security portfolio for M365. Such as information protection. So these are services that allow you to discover your data, classify it, protect it, and then monitor it going forward. So how does this work? So metadata is written into the document files. It travels with that document as it moves. The metadata is in clear text within the file so that other systems such as a DLP engine can read it. So, you know, if you've got something that's sensitive, it can get flagged and stop, you know, leaving the organization. That metadata can be used to apply, you know, protection action such as DLP or data governance action, and that can be determined by policies that the organisation themselves, you know, will generate. So an example of that would be, you know, one of your users checks out a document from SharePoint, that downloaded file that they take down to their laptop is still protected because of that metadata, and it knows, you know, the only people that can have access to it are those that are authorised to do so. Just moving that file out of your organisation doesn't, you know, remove those policies that you've, you know, worked hard to put in place. You've got Microsoft Secure Score and Compliance Score. So again, M365 tools that give you a numerical score based on a number of different factors and a measure of how secure or compliant your organisation is. So these are great. It's not really important what your score is day one, but it's an easy way of being able to check your progress over time by making improvements, you know, on that score. The platform itself will give you recommendations. It will give you pre-configured defaults across a number of different products that are secure. And if you do want to compare to see how, you know, you're getting on, you can do that against companies that are of a similar size, companies that are within the same industry, or, you know, using a similar spread of Microsoft products. Really good to be able to, you know, report back to the board, to your customers, of how you're doing as a company around compliance and security, and, you know, show you going through that continuous improvement. So staying with compliance, you know, you've got the ability to run realistic attack scenarios with Attack Simulator. These simulated attacks can help you identify and find vulnerable users before a real impact impacts your bottom line. You've got insider risk management to help mitigate risks associated with sensitive data leaks, IP theft or insider trading. And then you've got communication compliance policies in Microsoft 365 to help you overcome many modern challenges associated with compliance for both internal and external communications. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the cybersecurity technologies available to Microsoft customers, as well as, you know, the products that are available. I'd also just like to take a moment to talk you through the data and the AI capabilities that underpin many of these services. So, you know, Microsoft Threat Intelligence, at the bottom left corner of the slide, you know, it's another huge advantage that you can leverage using these products, and probably already are, you know, without realising it, the products that you've already got in place from Microsoft.